Hello, friends. So I thought I'd do a little verbal processing with you today after reading some verses in Romans, and it had me thinking and meditating and processing what I was reading. And so I wanted to share with you and process with you. So I remember being in Bible college, and it was my last year, and I came across my life verses, which have really stuck with me since then. And it's funny how God uses the things that we love to speak to us. So in this passage, it was the imagery of trees. And I've always loved trees. And so I memorized Jeremiah 17:7 and 8, and it says this: the person who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence indeed is the Lord, is blessed. He will be like a tree planted by water. It sends its roots out towards a stream. It doesn't fear when heat comes, and its foliage remains green. It will not worry in a year of drought or cease producing fruit. Now, I thought that was a fantastic verse. And I was 19 or close to 20 at the time, and I started asking the Lord, please help me be that tree. Help me be that tree whose roots are planted deep, whose tree never ceases to produce fruit, that I wouldn't be afraid in drought, that I wouldn't be afraid in life. Help me to trust you in such a way. And I would pray this verse on a daily basis. And at that time I was living in Florida, and then God moved me to Pennsylvania to work with Bob and Dana Gresh. And it was amazing and exciting and terrifying all at the same time. And I'd been praying this verse, and also a friend of mine had given me this book called Anonymous to read, and it was such perfect timing. The author of that book is still one of my favorites, and that book also uses the imagery of trees. And during that season of praying these verses, I had no idea what I was praying or saying. I was very naive. In a good way, how we all are very passionate about our faith and excited to go deeper in the Lord. But I didn't understand what that meant and what it would take for my roots to grow deep and go deep. And during that season of my life, when I moved to Pennsylvania, many things happened that were very, extremely difficult. It felt like one thing after another. My grandfather died suddenly. He was like a father to me. There was divorce in my family, a remarriage that was unexpected. Everything felt like it was being turned upside down. One of my parents' houses caught on fire. My dad ended up with cancer. And it was just one thing. Then my other grandfather died. There were just so many things that were happening in this season after I prayed this prayer. And I didn't know what was happening. It took me off guard. I was very young, and even young in my faith. And I didn't understand why God was allowing these things to happen. It was very, very difficult season for me. But in reading Romans 5 this morning, I was reminded of that season and how we don't have hindsight until we're out of those difficult seasons. But really, it's the affliction that helps us go deep, that helps our roots grow deep. So this is what I was reading this morning, Romans 5. And it talks about how we've been declared righteous by faith. But then it says, and not only that, in verse 3, but we rejoice in our afflictions, because we know that affliction produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope. This hope will not disappoint us, because God's love has been poured out in our hearts through the Holy Spirit who was given to us. What stood out to me was, we know that affliction produces proven character. And what that says to me is that they had experienced a lot of affliction also. And I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that I now know And I have seen how affliction can produce character and endurance and all the good things. But in the midst of it, I couldn't see it. When I was going through it, I couldn't see it. But now, as I've grown and matured in my faith with the Lord, I can see how rejoicing in our afflictions. I can't say I'm there yet. I can't say that I'm rejoicing quite yet when afflictions come, but I can see why we would rejoice, because we know that affliction produces endurance. I look back to that season of my life, and there have been other seasons since then where there has been much affliction, even in this last season of our lives. But I didn't endure as well. And even in reading this book that I'm reading now, The Night is Normal, by one of my favorite authors, same author who wrote Anonymous. Even in reading that, I'm just reminded how it is the afflictions, it is the nights, those darkest times that can produce endurance and character and hope. Because we learn that we can't do it on our own, that we need the Lord, that we have to depend on Him, that our roots have to go deep. It goes back to my last video about practical intentionality. We have to be intentional in our relationship with the Lord in the good times and the bad. And let's be honest, the good and the bad are often happening at the same time, right? They're often at the same time. There's excitement and joy and affliction happening simultaneously. And so I want to encourage you today, rejoice with me in your afflictions, because we know that afflictions produce endurance. Endurance produces proven character, and proven character produces hope. And our hope ultimately is in the Lord. Our hope is ultimately knowing that this world is not our home, that ultimately we get to spend eternity with Him, and that how we spend our life here matters. So let's rejoice together. Let's encourage each other. Let's help cheer each other on, because as we are in this resistance training season, as we are building these spiritual muscles of endurance, it's not easy. There can be lots of tears. There can be the feelings of helplessness and sadness. But in the midst of it, we can still have joy. In the midst of it, we can still see the good. And so I just want to encourage you today. Let's rejoice together. Let's allow our afflictions to produce good things. Because we're not alone. God bless you, and I hope this encourages you.